So welcome everyone to the BDC Partners webinar. My name is Bruce McFarlane. I'm the CEO of BDC Partners. This is our fourth webinar, this one partnering people for performance. It's part of our series of Why Franchise. We've previously run webinars around strategy and financial modeling, on legal structures, franchise recruitment and franchise sales, on technology for use for franchisees and for customer engagement. And today, it's all about people today. So obviously a very important part of we're for people that are considering franchising. For those of you, if this is the first of your BDC Partners webinar, BDC Partners is a group that was set up to partner with franchisors and retailers to help them to grow. We have 5 businesses. We've got BDC Property, where we find sites, BDC Recruitment, where we help franchisors find franchisees, BDC Law, BDC Performance, which we'll hear a little bit more about that today with John, and BDC Strategy, where we assist franchisors in that journey of setting up a franchise system, or also we run some webinars and some conferences as well. So we have a conference in Sydney if you're interested in coming along. We're also part of the BDC Collective. BDC Collective is a group of businesses that share similar values that help franchisors in different capacities. So we have an insurance company, Benjamin & Benjamin. We have a location intelligence business, Gap Maps, shop fitters in associated projects, HR in the Save group, business brokers with BF Brokers, accounting, finance, and digital with Blue Rock. And all of these businesses work really closely together. And so you can see them as part of this series as well. What I'm going to do now, just 1 minute, is share my screen. John, how did I go? Can you see that, Jane and John?
Okay.
Great. So the other thing I'd like to do is just welcome and thank our partners, our event partners. So Spotlight, Reportin, Docio, and Ops Central. So they're part of this series and they're presenting at different sessions along the way. But thank you very much for your support of the series. Our presenters today, so John Cooksey is the CEO of BDC Performance. Welcome, John. And Jane Save is the director of the Save Group. We're going to hear a bit more from them in a minute. The last of the admin things, we are open to questions along the way through. So the questions will come through the Q&A function. So if you have a question, please just do that. It'll come up. I will see that question and I can ask the presenters at the time. So feel free to ask questions at any time along the presentation. So John, went straight to that. There we go. John, over to you.
Time to start. Thanks, Bruce. And morning, Jane. I think this is a really good topic. Naturally, something that Jane and I have spent a lot of time in our corporate careers, but it's pretty obvious when we're working closely with franchisors that there's a big focus on products and services and finances and operational processes and things. But in reality, this sector, as much as any other, is really dependent on the people within the sector. And I thought rather than go into detail around processes and case studies and things, which we will be doing, it'd be good just to, I guess, to raise the thought process up a little bit and just look at why people do what they do. So, why would they be an employee? Why would they be a franchisee? And I guess what we find in life is because we all feel some sense of connection. So, maybe because we're having fun, maybe it's because we're part of a family, a community involvement. We could be fighting fires, collecting for the salvos and so on. And, I think back to times when that was equally true for me. One of my favorite times was I was lucky enough to help found a community choir called Stairwell to Heaven, as it turns out, which we started in the stairwell of a primary school, hence the name. But for us, that was a great way to connect. We used to belt out pop and gospel songs, occasionally African songs, and then we'd, adjourn to the local watering hole to talk about politics. And this was pre-COVID, so we didn't get a chance to complain about COVID. It was so long ago, we could probably talk about the GFC. But it's similar for new employees and new franchisees. They come to us because they feel some sort of connection. Either they've responded to an ad, they've been referred by somebody else, or in fact, you may be self-employed, you may have started your own business. So I guess it's important to reflect on how that connection starts. And so, for example, for me, as a father, a teacher of martial arts, having worked in a number of businesses and so on, it's that sense of affinity or connection, again, how people come to be part of an activity. So, it's really important. If there wasn't a great sense of affinity or connection, there wouldn't be such things as New Year's resolutions. There wouldn't be anything like love at first sight. Bruce is smiling. He's thinking about the Geelong Cats, obviously, but, he'll stop thinking about that for a day or so and then get back to, appreciating them again. Or that, that warm glow as your favorite meal arrives at the table. But it needs to be more than that. So for a sense of progress, if you like, we need to have a set system of roles and behaviors so people understand what they need to do, and then a sense of what the outcomes and benefits would be for that. And what that does, that generates some energy. And then if we continue to do that for a sense of progress, if you combine that affinity into energy and continue to apply roles and behaviors and a sense of reward, then that ends up in a sense of synergy, which is really important, which is where we really start to get benefits when we're partnering with people, whether it's our family, whether it's business partners, franchisees, and so on. When you have that synergy, that's when your smaller wins turn into bigger wins, trust is developed, the skills and knowledge of the participants increase, everybody's willingness to participate goes up as well. And typically in an organization, when it comes to people and HR processes, a lot of that falls to the business owner, the founder, the operations director, and sometimes that really doesn't take as much effect, have as good, strong an impact as they need. So what I thought I'd do is present just a bit of a template, if you like, or a framework to think about how HR works. So for example, a lot of organizations will dive straight to culture. So they'll say, we're going to be a brilliant company, we're going to attract people, we're going to tell them this is going to be the best place to work, albeit it's a newish organization. What's more important is to have a framework and a path that you can take employees down. For example, starting with the workforce foundation. So what is our organization? How is it going to be designed? How are we going to source talent? What sort of people do we need? What sort of capabilities do they require? Do we want them from inside our sector or from outside the sector? So a current observation of mine is the franchise sector, like everybody, wants people that have worked in franchising to come and work in franchising in a sector that's got a modest group of employees compared to, say, the banking or finance sector. That's going to be a challenge in time. So it's important to understand what underpins organizational excellence. And then, once you've worked out who you want and how you want to attract them, you then need to bring them into the business. And in talking to franchisees, franchisors of late, this onboarding of people and franchisees is particularly important. How do you get them into the business? How do you make sure they understand the right way to do the role that they've come in to do? Once those foundations are in place, then it's around talent management, things like how do we talk to people about how they're performing on the job? How do we do that with individuals or groups? Then what sort of development do we need to provide, again, for an individual or for a team? Often organizations, my observation is that sometimes they develop people too well. They spend too much money on development. So the natural tendency for an immature organization is to spend money. We've employed people, we've got them in the job, they seem to be performing okay. We feel this urge to provide learning and development, and often you're wasting your money. There's really a very small number of people in an organization that realistically will become true leaders, take on a true leadership role. And those people, if you allocated, $1,000 a person to develop them, they might find using that $1,000 in another way, and some of the ways that Jane's going to talk about a little bit later in this webinar, they might like you to spend the money on them and their family or other things rather than sending them to a leadership course that they really don't need to attend. And then in line with that flow from affinity through to energy and into synergy, what is the reward that people are going to get? So naturally, we're all meant to fuel ourselves based on intrinsic rewards. So we're all meant to be self-motivating and bright and shiny whenever we rock up to work or pick up the kids or, coach our local footy team or, go to dinner with our partner, but that's not always the case. And from an organizational perspective, those rewards need to be put in place by the organization, at least appropriate rewards in order to achieve or encourage people to continue to do the work and then help you achieve organizational outcomes. And from a higher level perspective, and I alluded to this at the beginning, sometimes companies go to culture and straight to culture. We've got a great culture, but they can't really define culture. And if they haven't got the foundations in place, then they're undermining their culture efforts. So it's particularly annoying for employees and extraordinarily transparent, really, to employees in a company that talks about having a brilliant culture if they're not paying people properly. There are some things that really need to be in place, and part of the reason we've partnered with somebody like Jane, who's has international expertise across HR, particularly with businesses that aren't bright and shiny, so aren't banks and insurers that have endless amounts of money. Qantas, as it turns out, will have a lot of money to develop people now. They've just turned into a $2-point-something billion profit in the space of seemingly, feels like 6 weeks. I know it's not 6 weeks, but they're not doing so bad now. So they'll be developing people left, right, and center, and they've got the money to do it. But lots of hands-on grassroots organizations, and that's the franchise sector, don't have the luxury of discretionary funds to throw on a leadership retreat to shout their team members fancy watches. It really needs to be something that, from a return on investment perspective for employees, that each organization really has a look at what are our workforce foundations. How do we then encourage people to perform on the job? How do we develop them so they're very good at what they do as individuals, as opposed to put in a broad brush learning platform? Had a client a number of years ago, a large bank, and they spent a lot of money on an internal learning and development platform, and then said to all their employees, this is open to you. You can do as much learning and development as you like, which culturally backfired because they didn't need to do all the learning and development that was in the platform, and they weren't coached on the programs they should be doing to help them do better. And in fact, they all started to feel, those with kids and other, the people that were single and early stage career, they loved it. They were in the platform left, right, and center. The majority of the workforce, they felt like they were being undermined or, almost threatened by this learning platform, because if I don't go in and do learning courses, then do I come across as somebody who doesn't care as much as Sally or Tom? So it really was positioned in quite an inappropriate way. As an organization grows, and we won't talk about business growth stages, and we can stay on this slide while I introduce Jane. There are things that do need to be put in place at a higher level. So what are our capability growth plans? So do we have succession planning for an emerging franchisor? And it's been started by a couple of founders. We now need operations leaders. Who will be our next operational leader? Do we need to go outside to find another operational leader, and so on? And as we grow, are we going to be able to maintain the culture that we've got? Or are we going to need to start to do things that are different in order to maintain that culture, as in spend more time with our teams and so on? Jane has worked a lot with organizations around these sorts of things, and she's going to share with us a couple of case studies where she's partnered with hands-on organizations like franchisors to help to engage their employees and make sure that they're, if not on the right path, at least understand where they are on that path. So I might hand over to Jane.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, John and BDC Collective, for having me in. So yeah, everything John said was very relevant and very important. So I thought I'd just talk about some ways, I guess, to improve performance at organizations and at franchisees. So when we're looking at this case study one, I thought this was quite interesting, and it's something I do with some clients, but it's proven to be very successful. So we know that we've got a labor shortage in the market at the moment. It's definitely improved or is improving, but it's not improved and back to where it should be. So finding talent in the market is a big issue for all of us. So what we want to focus on when talent is an issue is we really want to focus on retaining those A players. So we all have those people in our companies that are, your 5 or 6 that if they were to leave tomorrow, they would take with them a lot of IP and things would fall down and break down. So we want to make sure we retain those A players. We spend all this money recruiting people, and then at the end, when people leave, we want to know why. We do all these exit interviews. So these stay interviews are the proactive approach to retention. So what this client has done is conducted what's called a stay survey that was done through a third-party consultant. So the company didn't try to do it themselves, because sometimes if your boss is interviewing you and asking you questions about your career, you're not as likely to be as honest. So if you do it with a third party, we find that we get better results. So in this stay interview, what we're looking to identify with these A players is we want to find out why Joe joined this company 5 years ago. And maybe it was something as simple as the money was decent and the location was good. And that's what satisfied his needs at that time. But 5 years later, why is he staying? That's what's really important. And today, it might be the people, it might be the growth and development opportunities, and it might be the company he's working for has big ambitions and he wants to be a part of them. So we're looking at that variance. Why did they originally join versus why are they staying? And how do we retain them long term? And we ask them some really direct questions. And this is the best way to find out how to retain employees, is to actually ask them, what are the issues you're facing currently? What could make you leave in the future? And how could we curb that? What could we do to retain you? You will find that the people will give you the answers if you ask the right questions. So that's what this stay interview is all about, proactive retention. What we found in this particular case study, we ran it on the 5 or 6 A players, and then we actually pulled together and collated the team results because we wanted to see some big themes as well, not just the individual themes, but areas identified for improvement. So this particular company had some issues with remuneration and benefits. So like John was talking earlier, people didn't feel like they were being rewarded for the company's success, but they felt like they were putting in a lot of effort. So this company actually went on and developed some really good KPI and goal setting process that was then linked to rewards. And rewards don't always have to be monetary. It could be a voucher to take your family out for dinner. So you can be creative. So that was one big one that came out of it. Another one was communication was an issue on where the company was going. So this forced this particular company to make a really strong 1, 3, and 10-year plan and communicate it to all of its staff. That was lacking. People want to know that they're in a successful business and they want to understand where it's going in the future so they can be a part of that journey. And then the really interesting one that occurred in this case study was 2 of the employees were considering leaving the organization and they were unhappy. 1, unhappy. 2, just wanted to change careers. And this was in photography. So this was in filmography, photography industry. This person wanted to become a teacher. So they were going in a different career. We actually ended up amicably exiting both of those employees. Now, what's good about that is if we hadn't have conducted these stay interviews, these employees could have been with us for another year. And what was clear and evident was we were paying them 100% salary, but they were probably working at about 50%. Because when you decide and you make that decision to exit, you're not going to get the best out of that person. So by amicably exiting them quite quickly, we were able to stop, I guess, any wasted funds moving forward, have that happy exit, send them on their way, and actually get them to help us replace their roles and train up the new people. So really positive result.
Interesting, Jane, that they're the people that they've identified as their A players. So they haven't done it for the whole staff. They've just done it for a select group. And then 2 of the 5 that they picked weren't as happy as they thought. So
yeah,
they got some great insights.
The company director was shocked, Bruce, to be honest. Yeah. He was like, what? What do you mean?
Do you know what?
If you don't ask the questions, you don't find out the answers.
Do you know what? In order to select the A players, was it because I imagine the interviews were face to face with the actual people? So, what was the criteria? Just the managing director just picked 5 people on his gut feel as to who the best people were, or the most important to the organization?
It was on gut feel, but he also took into consideration who would be the hardest to replace and who holds the most IP about my business. Whereas if they left tomorrow, where would the biggest gap be? Because when you don't have really good systems and processes in businesses, sometimes you rely on one person's brain and they hold a lot of information. The risk is you assume they're never going to leave, right? You think they're your A player, you think they're loyal to the business. But if they turned around and gave you 1 month's notice, 1 month is not enough time to get everything out of their head and turn it into a process and system. So yeah, it was gut feel, but it was also critical roles in the business that he thought would be hard to replace if they did leave. So he just wanted to know, how long will they be with us? Are they a flight risk in 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months? And that's a straight up question that we asked all of these employees throughout the process.
Do you often use anonymous employee engagement surveys or in conjunction with something like this, or is this just a standalone process that you didn't go through?
Yeah, so this particular one, the individual feedback that you get, we don't pass on every word verbatim that the employee has given us because we're having an 1.5-hour interview. So there's a lot of information that comes out. We pass on what we think the actionable items are. So we take any problems raised, we ask them for the solutions, we help them make them SMART goals, and then we pass back to the business what they can do to retain this employee. So there is some confidentiality, but there is a report given. When we collate for the team results, there's more confidentiality, obviously, when you're collating more results. Yep. And I guess the second part to the answer is, do we run anonymous surveys in conjunction? Yeah, we do, but a very different process to this.
Cool. Thanks.
Good. And then this case study too, this is all about building better workplace relationships. And I've used the example of DISC. So there's lots of personality or work style assessments out there. I just use DISC because I find it the simplest one to actually train people on if they haven't had training on personality assessments before. So what we're trying to do here is we really want, and I'm focusing on the management team to start. It's great to cascade it down to the organization, but you got to hit your managers first, that you want them to be competent leaders and motivating everybody underneath. So we need our managers to really understand themselves and to become self-aware of their own management style. And this will also help them develop their emotional intelligence, which we know is a key trait for success for any leader or manager. So doing something like a DISC or some kind of work style assessment will help them become self-aware, because sometimes we just don't know how we're acting and how other people are perceiving it, our employees. So once they understand themselves, we then look to try and train them on how they can do some people reading, to be those mini psychologists. How do I people read my employees to work out what work style they are and how I should better treat and adjust them? Once you can identify where you think your employee sits, and it might be as simple as, are they more introverted? Are they more extroverted? Do they like working at a faster pace, a slower pace, and they need time to think? Are they task orientated and they just like to get tasks done, tick things off a list? Or are they people orientated? Is every decision going to, front of mind will be, how is it going to affect my people, my team, those around me? So these are the simple things you look at when you're doing people reading. And once you can do that, then you can actually adjust your management style to better suit the needs of your employees. And this is important when it comes to things like, how do you onboard and induct a new employee? We all assume we've got this checklist and we go through the same induction and onboarding process for the next 10 employees that come into the organization. What we lack to think about is that people need to be inducted and onboarded differently because we learn in different ways. So if I just use the DISC model as a theory, if I'm task orientated, I need to come into the organization, and what I need for my work style and my personality is I need a really clear job description. I need really clear KPIs and goals. I need to know what I'm doing on my first day, second day, first week, second week, and what my projects are. I need my IT to be set up. These are the things that are important to me because I'm task focused. If you go and take that same induction onboarding process that I just explained and you do that for somebody who's people orientated, you're probably going to miss the mark. So your people orientated employees need to be onboarded. What's important to them in their first 2 weeks is, do I fit here? What is the culture like here? Do I fit in? Are the people nice to me? Do I feel like I belong? Is this somewhere I want to work? So they're making different types of decisions. So what you need to do for them is to make sure that you've actually set them up to have meetings with all the critical people in the organization, with each of the departments or each of the managers. Have you organized a lunch on their first day? Have you done some kind of budding or mentoring system? And the way they prefer to learn is face-to-face. So they like to be shown, taught, and sat down, not just given the book on how to do this. So in this particular case study, this was for a caravan company. It was done with the management team because there was a lack of trust within the management team and a lack of communication. So we found that it did build that trust and communication across the management team, and it became a language within their organization. So they would then start using DISC, one, to call each other out when somebody was acting in a different way, but two, to help with like conflict resolution between themselves, but also with employees when there were issues. We found that it helps just general management style, and the HR issues started to decrease in a short amount of time, just because managers were more self-aware as to how they were treating their employees. And we did see reduced turnover in the next 6 months, which was quite significant. Look, it was 20% to 5%, but it wasn't a large organization, but still a really big improvement there.
You'd be pretty happy with that reduction anyway, even in a small.
That's right.
Cool.
Great. And then I just wanted to touch lastly on just some ideas that hopefully people online can take away. So what do you do when it comes to employee benefits? How are you trying to retain employees, and what are you offering them? So you want them to offer you 100% of all of their effort, skills, and knowledge that they have to do the best job possible. And that's great. And hopefully they will. But you've got to give them some type of reward or recognition. So a few ideas that I've seen across different companies over my time. The first one is birthday leave. So allowing that employee to have their birthday off every year. It's like an additional annual leave day, but it goes a long way. Mental health days are now becoming quite big. So that can be an additional day of leave, or you can just have it as a part of your personal 10 days that you get each year, but just say no certificate required. You let us know whenever you need to take your mental health day, no questions asked. EAP programs are really popular at the moment, and there's so many health and safety regulation acts being updated and amended at the moment that it's good to have an EAP counselling program in place for employees, because we do have these obligations of the psychosocial hazards and identifying them in the workplace. So by having an EAP program, you're one step forward on meeting those regulations.
Jane, sorry, I'll just for 1 sec. John, and probably more so John might know the answer, but Jane, do you know if any franchise systems have EAPs, if EAP providers have been offering support across a network where the franchisee, because they're obviously not employees. I know it's employee assistance programs. I don't know whether there's any franchisee assistant programs.
I think it's a really interesting question. I think EAP programs are generally adopted by quite mature organisations that have done most other things in the people space first. You don't tend to find many that include it early on. And it's an interesting dynamic. I was just thinking then about, everything that Jane has mentioned so far is relevant to employees, but it's all equally relevant to franchisees and the relationship with them, and also their relationship with their employees too. I think there's a massive opportunity in the market for guiding franchisees and their relationships with their employees too. Because it's and it's interesting, cynics would say, look, an employee assistance program is only for companies where their employees are soft, right? And having, provided EAP services to executives at major banks 15 to 20 years ago, the things that people come to the EAP program about cannot be resolved quickly in a workplace. No. Nobody turns up to an EAP provider. It's almost like they're wearing a trench coat, and like people don't use and abuse it. It's almost embarrassed when they turn up, but they can really benefit from it. So it's
I've seen it in larger organizations. I think some of the the larger franchisors that we work with, it's, you know, that's something that they should have a think about. But I was just thinking that even an emerging franchisor that maybe they may not have many employees in their organization, so it's possibly not cost effective for them. But if they've got 15 franchisees and they can group them in a policy or something like that, it might be something that the franchisees are all going through these challenges, you know, that the employees do. So if you want to make sure that you've got high performing employees and franchisees, if you could put something in place, I think it'd be really beneficial. So sorry to jump.
No, what I'll jump in, Bruce. So the EAP program, you know, there's lots of them out there, but the one I'm thinking about specifically has one that's targeted for the employees, but then it has what they call a manager portal, which is just for managers. So that's what the franchisees would use. And it's their own hotline and their own services specifically to do with how to run a business. So that would be perfect for franchisees.
Yeah.
It's just different labeling within the EAP programs, but I think would be quite suitable.
Yeah, because I think the first couple you mentioned, that we're talking about staff of the franchisor, but, you know, the franchisee's got to manage their own. But this one was one across, and the same, probably the next one I'll let you go, but it applies to franchisors and franchisees.
Yes. Yeah. So look, I won't go through them all. We can read them on the slide, but I think other interesting ones, you know, buddying and mentoring programs. And maybe that's something franchisors could try and help their franchisees. You know, can we set them up with somebody in another type of business where we can buddy and they can have a mentor, somebody who has run that business before?
I think that's particularly important because it's that and succession planning are often quite strongly connected. And certainly franchisors have sort of buddy programs when it comes to franchisees influencing franchisees, but that's definitely an area that's underutilized without a doubt, particularly as they're not overly hierarchical organizations, right? So you need to get input from your peers. So, yeah.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And these are things that, you know, if the franchisors can set some of these things up for themselves, they can actually, like the novated leasing option one, you could possibly link that across your whole network as well, as a benefit for your franchisees as well as your employees.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
And then other ones that are popular, you know, these kind of things, these early Fridays and 4-day weeks are becoming quite popular. Ability to have flexible working arrangements, childcare allowance now when people are actually returning back from maternity, paternity leave, and helping them want to re-enter the workforce and make it affordable. A lot of people don't come back because it's just too expensive. Yeah, they're probably the key ones, but happy to answer questions on others. I just thought a whole bunch of ideas that you can think about and utilize.
Just on that, we will send the slides around for people that are online, so you can get the list if you didn't get it there.
Great.
Thanks, Jane. I think we're going on to you, John, next.
Yes. All the things Jane talked about, you know, the big concept at the moment in the marketplace is around quiet quitting. And I think, you know, to this stage, I'm going to talk about franchisees in a minute. You know, the things that Jane and I have talked about are all things that you can do as an organization to ensure that you're not a victim of the quiet quitting bug. You know, if you talk to employees, they'll tell you what they need, how they're going, and so on. And whilst you wouldn't need to put that whole list of things in place that Jane's gone through, you know, Jane could help prepare a package of things that would make a massive difference from a retention perspective. Finally, though, I think, you know, this session is about partnering people for performance, and there's a slightly tongue-in-cheek slide, but the franchise sector is probably the most diverse sector in the market. You know, the people who work in banking, you can pick a banker a mile away in the city. You know, insurers are insurers and so on, but the franchise sector is extraordinarily diverse from a business, from an industry perspective, and from a type of person perspective too. So I thought it'd be useful to touch on how to partner with and engage franchisees as well, because at the end of the day, the success of a franchise system is in the hands of the franchisees. It's not really in the hands of the franchisor. They're guiding the franchisees. And we touched on a little bit that franchisees have their own employees, And it really is only the more mature organisations that are providing proactive guidance to franchisors. So this slide, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but everybody coming into franchising, whether they're employees or indeed franchisees, have come from vastly diverse backgrounds, and everybody's interested. Everybody's kind of keen on the way in. So what I thought I would do is just share 2 ways to partner with franchisees in particular. So the first is as they come into the organisation, which is really the most important part. As employers, we can't afford to employ people and make mistakes, but we can survive that unless, you know, they steal from us or whatever. But a franchisee, they're locked in and they're paying to be part of it 3 years, 5 years, 5 plus 5 and whatever. And so, you know, more so than with employees even, it's really important to measure whether they're suitable to be part of a franchise organisation to start, and your franchise organisation or your business. So we work closely with people using a certain framework. This is by way of example, but it does fit other ways of introducing employees and franchisees into business networks. So the first is around compatibility, which measures values, stages of growth, culture, and work style, some of which are inherently consistent. So, you know, somebody's values will continue to be that way throughout most of their life, but affected by circumstance. Stages of growth is the type of business they're suited to fit into, and that's particularly important for both employees but also franchisees. So a franchisee, for example, or potential franchisee that's suited to working or owning a McDonald's is different to one working for a dog washing business or a startup. Work style is in line with what Jane was talking about, is that probably one of the things we can affect the most and measure and develop is that work style. But some people have an inherent work style. Some people are drivers, some people are connectors, some people are promoters, some people are people, some people really don't want to talk to anybody. And that compatibility is really measuring whether people will do what's required. So are they a good fit coming into this relationship? Do they have the right values? Do they have a similar cultural approach? And, you know, what is their working style? The competencies part is measuring, you know, can they do the job, or do they have the skills to either do a job or to be a franchisee? So some franchise systems need different skills than others, you know, depending on the sector. So again, we have the finance sector, dog washing, and there's a whole range in between. Jane talked around emotional intelligence and social intelligence, which are becoming more and more noteworthy as concepts in the business space, but not too many people know how to measure it or really understand it, or indeed what to do, as Jane does, to develop it. And the other part is, so we've got, will they do what's required? The competencies is, can they do what's required? And the capacity is the extent to which they can do that. So some franchise systems require much more of a sales style, so it's an outbound approach. And also there's a sense of a business path. So, you know, is it somebody going into a single unit franchise or an area or a territory or a master franchise, all of which are completely different business scenarios. Similar to what you would do bringing in a director into your own business if you're investing in growth. So it's a good model and framework that we use with an appropriate assessment that mirrors what historically you would do bringing senior execs into a business, but now it's appropriate for bringing franchisees into a system as well.
And so those tools are something that, you know, someone's use as part of a process before they go too far down the track with the potential franchisees or employees within their organization, isn't it? So either or.
Yeah, that's right. And also after the fact too, you know, Jane made a really good point. Often we bring people into organizations and do a lot with them. It's at the start, and then we don't talk to them much after that. And so everything we've talked about today are things that you can do to partner with people before they join your business. Not long after they've joined, 6 months from now, 12, it's always something to revisit. So I'm meeting with a franchisor in their team tomorrow, and we've benchmarked their field team, for example. And it's a way for them to reflect on how they're going, to Jane's point, to learn more about themselves so that they can then work better with others and so on. So it can be used at a number of stages. The more critical, when you're naturally trying to screen out people to become potential franchisees, would be at the very beginning.
So Jane, do your clients use DISC prior to people joining, or is it normally afterwards?
Both.
Yeah. Okay.
Prior
Yeah.
is really good, so that if you're choosing between two candidates, sometimes it can help, but you want to have it before they're actually onboarded. So if you've made the decision to go with one candidate, you want to know how to bring them on board in the best way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it's always useful to have it as part of an established process. It's never great to run your process and then go, geez, I don't feel this is the right person for us, and then whack them with an assessment.
Yeah.
So, we told you you're going to be great. We've taken your deposit as a franchisee, but can you fill this out now? And okay, we don't like it. So it's particularly important. And the same with employees as well. So these all need to be part of an ongoing process.
Yeah, the Zoracle process is interesting, just to get an insight into your organisation as well, as to where everyone sits, whether it be the employees or the franchisees, and where they sit on those compatibilities or competencies. So it's great to get some insight, and same with DISC as well. Obviously,
every organisation that uses a salient, structured approach to doing things like this learns generally far more than they'd like to learn about their organisation.
Yeah,
they learn a lot, without a doubt. And the last thing I wanted to touch on was, again, around franchisees. This is the equivalent, if you like, of Jane's "Are you going to stay?" concept for employees, which is, to survey franchisees or engage them somehow in a really structured way. Often engagement for franchisors with their franchisees is through meetings and talking, conferences and events and so on. But at times, we find that with employees, it's similar with franchisees. At times, a tangible survey approach, which enables them to provide, to Jane's point, anonymous or not anonymous, should they choose, input is particularly important as well. And again, to Jane's point, some people will learn through hearing. I personally learn through reading, and others learn through doing. So again, you get much better input from franchisees and or employees if you did an employee survey, by giving them a number of ways to provide input. And that's something that we've experienced. And we know a lot of our clients, a lot of franchisor organizations are exploring these options.
So so employee engagement surveys or franchisee engagement surveys using similar type methodologies.
Appropriate. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The tool is, the questionnaire is the questionnaire. We if none of this existed and we started from scratch tomorrow and got everybody on the call now to help us out, we could create a survey asking pretty much the right questions. But it's where it fits in the process. And then with employee engagement and also with franchisee engagement, it's what you do next that's more important, because they will expect us to really know. If we say to them, how do you think we're paying you, if they're an employee, and we know that we're underpaying, that's our strategy, because they also know that, right? We don't need to ask that. So if you say, do you want to be paid more? The answer is yes.
Of course I do.
And so it really needs to be part of that. Jane talked about processes and systems. We started that at the top. It's probably a good place to finish it too, which is all of these things will work, but you need a framework and a process. And if you don't have experts in your business, you need to have somebody help you map that out, because it's not something that everybody's intuitively understands the benefit of partnering with people. How to do it and taking the time is the biggest challenge. Mostly the time, really. That's probably the biggest learning, I think, from all of this.
Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Jane. Thanks, John, for your insights today. And thanks for everyone who's jumped on the webinar today. And for those of you who are watching it later on the recording, thank you very much. Hope you found that interesting and beneficial and you got a lot out of it, like I mentioned earlier, we will send the slides around and John and Jane's details so you can contact them directly if you'd like to. We are, as I also mentioned, this is a series. Our next one is around property and finding the right locations, what to do in terms of negotiating that and what to do in relation to fitting it out. So our three wise heads in Tim, Mark, and Keith will deliver that one for you all. But thank you very much. And again, I'm going to thank our partners again. So thanks Docio, Op Central, and Spotlight Reporting for making this series possible.